And good morning. Welcome to another edition of Saturday Conversations, a podcast where we can go a little bit deeper with so many folks who are familiar on the Pittsburgh sports scene. My guest today needs no introduction. You can see him on the other side of the screen. Clint Hurdle rebonded our city with its baseball team, helped the Pirates snap a stretch of 20 consecutive losing seasons, and create what was the best sporting event, I will say, of my lifetime, the 2013 NL wildcard game. These days, Clint is a published author. His new book called Hurdleisms, Wit and Wisdom from a Lifetime of Baseball came out on February 11th. It's excellent. I've read it twice. Clint takes 25 of his favorite sayings, Hurdleisms, of course, and gives you the stories behind them. It's very easy to read, a wonderful concept. Well done, Clint. Thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Jason, I'm doing very, very well. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I want to get into the book itself, as well as your idea to write the book and what that process was like. We'll talk a little actual baseball. I do want to remind our viewers and listeners that this show is brought to you by Greenewalt Roofing. When you think of great roofs, you think Greenewalt Roofing Company. With over 20 years experience, Greenewalt knows your roof is your home's first line of defense from rain, wind, snow, and ice. That's why Greenewalt's standard for perfection is so important. You can trust them with their team of experienced installers. They will treat your property like it's their own. When it comes to roof replacements, Greenewalt Roofing is Pittsburgh's only choice. You can visit greenewaltroofing.com today or call 412-314-8882 and schedule your free estimate. PA contractor number 36262. All right. So you got the official part down, Clint. My first question is an obvious one. What led you, a lifetime, a baseball lifer, nearly 50 years of experience, what led you to write a book?
It happened organically, Jason. It wasn't something that I was ever seeking out. As a matter of fact, after we went to the World Series in Colorado, there were some people that reached out to me about writing a book. And then after the World Series in Texas, a different group of people reached out to me about writing a book. And then after my time in Pittsburgh, there's been some people reach out to me about writing a book, specifically about the 3 years which PNC Park turned into a hostile environment for visiting teams. I never felt comfortable writing a book while in uniform. And it wasn't until I got out of uniform that I had some people say, "Hey, have you rethought this?" And I go, "Yeah, but I don't want to write an autobiography." And I finally had a man reach out to me, Dave Burchett, who was doing the game production for the Rangers, say, "Would you like to co-author a book?" And I said, "Well, what does that mean?" He goes, "Well, I've written 7 or 8 books. I've had a couple books sell, 20, 30,000 copies. I have some experience. I've got some history. We'll sit down. We'll talk about life lessons learned in 2 different industries, same industry, 2 different jobs, failures, successes, family." It appealed to me, sharing authentic opportunities, sharing, vulnerable times. And Dave was going to do all the hard work. That was the kicker for me, to find somebody else that was going to do the work. So we went at this effort for over 2 years, and then push came to shove. It came time to find a publisher. This was the most interesting part, is that we, 2 smart guys, we've had some success. I thought not that people would be knocking our door down, but I didn't think it would take 20 people to call to say no. And after the 21 people said no, and the common fabric and the reason, okay, guys, there's some really good stuff in here, but 2 65-year-old men having a conversation on a porch, that's a very small demographic. This is what we were told, and this is real. Wow. You can't make people publish your book. So we started floating the idea, we'll self-publish. I wasn't as hot on that as Dave was. I figured, we spent 2.5 years, and now we're going to spend our own money to get our book out there? I don't know. Dave said, do me a favor. Talk to John Gordon, your friend. John and I have been friends almost 15 years. He's a best-selling author. He's got 17 number 1 sellers. He spoke to our team in Pittsburgh. I've known him. We pushed the book to John. John said the same thing, but he goes, "Clint, you've got some really good stuff in here. I've known you for 15 years. I've been writing down your quotes. I call them Hurdleisms. Why don't you write your own book?"
Yeah.
Well, I gave John 10 reasons why I shouldn't write my own book. And John goes at the end of the day, he goes, "So you're afraid?" I gave him 10 reasons why I wasn't afraid, and he answered back again, "So you're afraid." Basically, he dared me. I started chasing that journey. I talked to the Wiley publishers. After 3 or 4 meetings, we agreed on content, the way we were going to form it and shape it, and the story was going to be told. And then it was just up to me to write it. So it took about a year. I wrote for 9 months, and every word in that book, my hand to God's ears, my lips, I wrote every word in that book without anybody's help other than the editors, spell check, fact check, and everybody else. So everything's on me. If it's no good, it's mine. It's all me.
Well, I love the content in the book, Clint. I think it's fascinating. We'll talk about that. I love the idea for the book. I also like the design, just aesthetically. Like, it's a very sharp looking and good feeling book.
That was a conversation we had also. The people at Wiley are pretty smart. They've been doing this for a long time, and they took a chance on a rookie. Truthfully, I've got, maybe it lands, maybe it doesn't, but they asked me about books that I gravitated to, and I told them, I've been in love with books all my life. And I said, I fell in love with a particular type of book back in my playing days. I read Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. I was a Detroit kid. I followed the Tigers, Lions. I've told the story, Red Wings, Pistons. And Mitch was one of the guys on the Sports Reporter, so I always followed him. He wrote that book, and it was a small book.
Yeah.
It felt good in my hand. The lines were clean, just everything that you said. So when I told him, I said, I'm kind of a favor of writing a smaller book. They go, well, so are we. And I go, number one, I don't know if I have that much to say, but number two, why try and overkick, my coverage here the first time out? Let's just keep it simple and stay with the things I know and see how that goes.
Yep. Yeah, I read it. Absolutely. I could want more. That's probably a good thing to have, as opposed to, oh man, when's this guy just going to stop? When's he going to cut it off? So, all right. What was that like though? Actually writing all of these words, were you typing them out? Are you talking into a voice memos app? Did you find yourself, sort of creative on cue? Was it tough to get creative? Obviously you've lived it, but you've never had to get that experience out to your fingers. What was that like for you?
Jason, I tried all of the above because I have no experience in this arena. And I found out that my best vibe was sitting down and typing. I took all the journals that I've had since I've managed. I've got 20 journals, for 17 years of managing, but I've got 20 journals. The hitting coach's years were compiled in 3 big journals. But I just started rereading my journals. And then I got down and just started typing, whether it was on my phone, whether it was on a computer, whether it was on an iPad, on planes mostly, because I traveled just enough that gave me a time when I didn't have to type or work at home. I could be where my feet were at home with Carla and with the kids, but the typing was real. And then you got to meet deadlines. There's a word count. There's editors that I was back in school, and I told them, I said, hey, transparently, the last letter or thing that I wrote of any meaning was a love letter to my wife before I asked her to marry me. That was 26 years ago. Journaling is much different than writing, and all I had done was journal. So this was therapeutic. It was engaging, and plus I learned so very, very much through the process.
How did you choose 25? And that's, I don't know if I said that earlier. There are 25 sayings in here. How did you settle on 25? Did it just feel natural?
It just felt good. They had me reach out to people. John shared a dozen. I called some of my coaches. I called some other people. We came up with about 45.
Wow.
And then we started, and there's probably more now that I've finished reading all my journals. But we just, as we packaged it into a baseball season, which was another conversation, how do you want the book to read? How do you want it present? As we rolled it out. And then we tried to use these hurdleisms in the context of what was going on through the season, where they landed, how they happened, and some of them, when they happened, some of them actually happened in the time frame of the season that we portrayed in the book. But the number just seemed right. We were looking at a 20,000 word count. I didn't have a word counter on my computer. I told them I didn't want that because I would be always clicking to see how many words I had written.
Yeah.
And when I finished the copy, the raw copy, we had like 20,155 words. So I got in the ballpark right away. And then we just had to whittle it down a little bit. But that was just the right number, I think, that we all were happy with for the feel of the book and the length of the book.
Very cool. So Pirates fans who pick this up, you're gonna recognize this. These are, as somebody who was not covering pro sports, I don't know how many times I heard you say things like this, Clint, even getting onto the Pirates beat. Number 1, don't keep score. Number 2, shower well. 3, get a good pitch to hit. I'm not going to give them all away. You have to pick up the book. But a lot of stuff that we've heard out of Clint, as Pirates manager, in, again, hurdleisms, buy it and you can live it. It's a wonderful thing. So I want to unpack a few of those. But first, we have a message here, Clint, an area you know well, the Bradenton Area Convention and Visitors Bureau. 30-second ad. Be right back.
Embrace the laid-back charm of island life while sinking your toes in the sand and discovering real, authentic Florida in the Bradenton area. Unspoiled beauty and pristine beaches, a vibrant waterfront downtown energized by local arts and culture, fresh Floridian cuisine with a flourish of rich history, and friendly locals ready to welcome you to this preserved paradise on Florida's Gulf Coast. Plan your visit today at BradentonGulfIslands.com.
Welcome back to Saturday Conversations, chatting with Clint Hurdle about his new book, relatively new book, Hurdleisms. Going through some of these hurdleisms, Clint, I want to stop on number 7. I don't know why this grabbed me so much, but it did. Develop a white belt mentality. And you linked some of your time here in Pittsburgh, something you learned from Bernie Holiday, Kyle Stark, about a judo teacher who wanted to be buried in his white belt, wanted to be a white belt when he goes into the next world. You even talked about your son Christian's time in karate, and there's a wonderful story in there that cracked me up, the mic drop moment. So I wanted to talk about your, one, always having a learning mentality, but 2, recently you've taken that into a different arena with social media. Can you kind of, just shed some light into why and how you're always trying to learn?
Well, once I made the decision to put the uniform in the closet, and I meant that. It wasn't disrespecting the uniform. I just felt my time in the uniform was fulfilled.
Yeah.
And that it was time for me to find some growth in some other areas, and that the uniform wasn't going to define me. I needed to find Clint outside of a uniform and maybe introduce the Clint outside of a uniform to other people. My son challenged me in most of these areas, but especially with social media. But every year I pick a word. And I used to do this with my staff in Pittsburgh at the start of spring training. You pick a word, you tell the people why you picked the word and how you're going to commit to the word personally and professionally. So my word was growth in 2023. Christian said, okay, Dad, you've got this email chain that goes to 7,000 people. It's really nice. It reaches. He goes, but why do you not want to be on social media? Why do you not even, because I'd freak out. I go, Christian, I don't need any of that. I don't want that.
Yeah.
I'd go straight, old man, no. And he'd go, Dad, it's like you always say, you hunt for good, you find it. You hunt for bad, you find it. You can go on there and message your stuff. You don't have to get caught up in the gunfights or the fist fights. You just put your stuff out there. You go away, you'll see whether people follow or they don't. But Dad, there needs to be some more positivity on X, especially. He goes, Instagram's kind of fun. Facebook, that's kind of your age. LinkedIn, you used to be a businessman. He goes, you can fit in all those buckets. So he pushed me out there. I'm in it now for sure. And I'm just trying to share experience, strength, and hope. I don't get into fist fights. I don't argue. It's not political. It's not religion. It's what I believe in, what I share. And if you're on board, you like it, great. But the white belt mentality, it's been so important for me as I talk with my wife and we continue to grow together, life after baseball, is for me to grow and find different ways to grow. So this white belt mentality, Bernie told me the story. I fell in love with it. Christian lived it out. The white belt meaning, Dad, no, it's the best belt because it means you get to learn everything. So this whole social media concept has been growth for me. I've made some tremendous connections through this. I've reached out to some people I never would have met. Writing a book never would have happened to me if I would have not got out of my old comfort zone. And truthfully, the only thing that was holding me back was fear. As John said, fear of rejection. The book won't sell. It'll flop, whatever it is. So it's time for me to lay all that down and really start living a new life and growing in a new area.
Do you like it? You like social media and the interaction with people? Like, I know the growth. I know you're challenging yourself. I know white belt mentality. Do you find yourself, I don't know, growing from that or feeling enriched interacting with people on Twitter?
There's so many good people on Twitter, and there's people I'm learning from right now. I'm going to give a shout out to a guy. He's the mental skills coach with the Tampa Bay Rays, Justin Su'a, S-U apostrophe A. This is one of the smartest men in the world, and he's just a guy. And I share with him. There's a handful of people I follow that are growing me right now, still with leadership lessons, with different mentality. I'm spending time with John. Gordon invited me one of his training camps later in May where I'm going to be with Debo. I'm going to be, with a bunch of high performing public speakers that he's blessed me with an opportunity to get into. So I do believe it's viable. There's a lot of crap, but there's a lot of crap everywhere. It just depends on, how long you want to hang around the shadows and what you want to get involved in. So I do enjoy it. I just enjoy it in small doses.
I love it. I respect the heck out of how you've been able to interact with social media. As somebody who has to bathe in that, and I don't necessarily love it, and I've kind of curtailed and changed my usage of it. I love it. You interact with who you want to. A guy before I started doing this told me dictate to Twitter. And I realized that there's a shred of that that's right. I also like your mentality. I think that they share some similar strands. So anyway, all right. So another one I really like, Clint, I wanted to visit this as well. Build the house. For you, it's probably easy. You guys did a lot of that in Pittsburgh. They're trying to do something similar now. Creating a mindset. I think I'm going to quote you directly here, but where we didn't focus on what we didn't have and instead focus on what we did have. It's obviously easier said than done, right? Like I'm sure you're in, camp, you're working out, you're doing these things and you're looking at other teams saying, I want a payroll like this. I want this. I want that. How do you make that happen? How do you take an organization and get everybody focused on building the house?
Well, I think number one is you get any elephants that are in the room out of the room. Here's what we have. You're transparent, you're authentic and sharing. Here's what we have. How do we leverage what we have to get you men out there to play the best game of baseball you can play one night at a time? Each individual will go out there and have their best performance they can have that night, one night at a time. We were able to create an alignment in Pittsburgh that was real, from Neil to myself to the coaches to the players. Players had ownership of the clubhouse. We realized early on after the first 2 years, we were getting better. We didn't have enough depth. We didn't have enough experience in some areas. But for 9 years, we were in the hunt every all-star break. The first 2 years, we got punched in the mouth in the second half. The third year, Neil and his group, Dan Fox, Mike Fitzgerald, the guys up in the analytics part were so creative on some of the people we brought in. To bring in Liriano, to bring in Jay Happ, to bring in, Burnett and Martin, for me, were the deal makers. Yeah. Two men with edges on them that would cut you when they walked by you. They brought a toughness to our club that we didn't quite have. They made everybody on the club a little bit better. They made me better. They made the coaches better. We started going from hoping to win to expecting to win, and actually carrying a swagger. And as I said before, it becomes, a movement, and it starts with traction. The hard part is anytime you want to get traction, there's some friction involved. And the friction was involved in the growing pains we saw both second halves of the season in 11 and 12. And then in 13, you get to that point again where I know some people are probably waiting for the other shoe to drop. We know how this is going to end. The men in the clubhouse owned it. They took it to another level. They decided they were going to be uncommon, and sooner or later, some group was going to come together and stop this madness and turn this around and head in a different direction. And they were the ones that got it done.
And that sort of takes me into the other thing, the hurdleism I wanted to ask you about. Let's drop this old school versus new school debate. And I think that was a big part of what you guys did. I think it's a big part of, following you from afar and then covering you. One of the things I really like about you do a great job of marrying your own background, being an old school baseball guy, with accepting new age stuff and what Neil brought, and have to put all of this together and take advantage of all this stuff. And I feel like you get into a lot of that in that part too. And I know that was an important part of what you guys did.
I think there's another one in there that sets all this up. There's two kinds of people in this world: those that are humble and those that are about to be.
Yeah.
I finally got to the point in life and in sport where humble was where I needed to be, because I'd had everything else kicked out of me. And after the 2 years we had in Pittsburgh, hot starts, cold finishes, Neil and I sat down one day at my house, 8 hours. We put everything on the table. There had been some things I had leaned into. There were some things I wasn't leaning into. We were slowly trying to find our connection and our alignment. And by the end of that day, we were finally a pair. I mean, we were connected, but we weren't connected as far as all the chips were in. I shared all my thoughts with him. He shared his thoughts with me. We decided how we were going to marry the analytical structure with human analytics, which he felt I was good at running in the clubhouse. I know the people upstairs. We needed to get involved in that. So I said, Neil, give me one number that is really going to, what is your elevator pitch for the analytics? One sequence of events that should open my eyes. He goes, Clint, let me ask you a question. I think it was Dan, it was Neil. Dan had presented it earlier, but Neil followed up and he goes, so why do you hit McCutchen third? And I said, well, he's the baddest dude on the team. I mean, everybody that I ever grew up with, the baddest dude on your team hit third.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, it's kind of like when I was a player, the best player on the team hit third. He goes, do you realize the last 2 years, 11 and 12, that Andrew McCutchen has gone to the plate with nobody on base and 2 outs, twice as much as anybody else on our team in any of the other hitting spots? And I was like, what? I kind of heard rumblings of it, but to put the 2 years together, the numbers were overwhelming. And I was like, well, hell, that doesn't make much sense. What a dummy that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I said, okay, you got my attention. Now let's talk more. And then he hit on some of the areas he thought I could use to better make decisions based on the talent we had, the roster acquisition we had. He helped coach me up. I helped coach him up in some areas. It truly became a relationship where we were connected at the hip. We didn't always agree. And there was a lot of times that, at the end of the night, sometimes we won and one of us might not have been happy as the other, but we were working together and we were trying to make best decisions for the entire organization every day. And I think that kind of caught traction as well. But that's why the new school thing, there's parts of it that's good. Everything new is not good.
Yeah.
But there's some things out there that I needed to lean into, and I needed to trust other people's skill sets, to help us be better. And I did. I did an exercise in Colorado, which opened my mind up to this moment many years later. But I had an intern follow me with a pitch clicker. I said, every time I make a decision, I'm going to hold a finger up and I want you to click it. I was just kind of curious how many decisions I made in the day. So I got in uniform at 1:00. He followed me around. We got off the field from batting practice, 5:15. We go in my office. I go, what do you got? He goes, 212. I go, what? He goes, you held your finger up 212 times. I don't know if you made a decision every time, but that's what you did. I go, just think. I said, I made 212 decisions. Do you think I got them all right? And of course, he was a smart kid. He goes, there's a very unlikely chance you get them all right. It's just too high of a number. Yeah. But when you think about it, so what's the best way to get answers right? It's by inclusion. It's by trusting people that are smarter than you in other areas.
I love 212 decisions. My goodness.
Before the game started.
That is, wow. That is crazy. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the modern product, the modern Pirates. One of your players still playing, the baddest dude on the planet, still going at 37. I love it. I do have a short message I want to read, though, from Edgar Snyder and Associates, another one of our program sponsors. Law firms, they come and go, but what law firm has been here in Western Pennsylvania fighting for injury victims for more than 40 years? Edgar Snyder. What firm has a staff of over 130 people who live and work here? Edgar Snyder, of course. Law firms come and go, but Edgar Snyder is a name you can trust. Remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. If you've been hurt in an accident, call them, 1-800-94-EDGAR. Visit them at edgarsnyder.com. All right. Andrew McCutchen is still playing, Clint. What do you think about that? Are you surprised at all? Do you love watching him? I do personally, but what do you think?
I love watching him. I love his level of commitment. I love his preparation. Preparation is second to none, as good as anybody as I've ever had. I put it right there with Helton's, which I thought nobody would be able to match up to that. I love the man. I watched him go from being a bachelor to getting married, to having kids, to establishing a foundation. I know his mom and dad. I know his sister. We are connected in many ways at the hip. We still are. Maria reached out to Carla. They're on the island this spring. We stay engaged. I have the most professional and personal respect for this man. I'm pulling for him. Mitch Keller's still there. Bryan Reynolds is still there. So there's 3 guys hanging around. I want nothing but good things for the Pirates. I don't know how somebody could invest 9 years of their life and their family invested and still not want to see the people of Pittsburgh, the fan base of Pittsburgh, everybody that's connected to the club have fun and for the Pirates to win. So I am pulling for them. I'm pulling them for like a sled dog, man. I just love to see them turn it around, for them to be able to feel what we felt for 3 years in PNC Park, that vibe, that play-in game, the wild card game. When the city showed up, the fans showed up, the players showed up, national TV, all of it. You couldn't have had a better game. That's real in Pittsburgh, and it's there. It's a sleeping giant waiting to happen. And I'm just pulling for those guys to get it going in the right direction, and hopefully that momentum will carry them through the season, and they'll turn it around.
So one guy that you didn't have, of course, I'm sure you've watched him. Everybody has watched him. Such a talking point here, Paul Skenes. Do you imagine managing a guy like that? How do you just like, maybe this is your uniforms in the closet, you just like sitting back and watching and observing? What do you think about such a horse like that?
We were able to work with Garrett Cole breaking in, and
Yep.
Garrett Cole's pretty special when he broke in. But there's another expectation here, or some things I see. I compare it more to Dwight Gooden's rookie year than Garrett's rookie year. The year Skenes had last year, people ask me, most of them are from Pittsburgh, have you ever seen anything like this? There's no way. And I'll say Dwight Gooden, and they get mad. Like, well, wait a minute. You asked
the question.
Yeah, they asked me the question. They go, Gooden couldn't have been a good. I said, well, just look at the numbers. If you look at Dwight Gooden's rookie numbers, they'll blow your mind, just like Skenes' numbers blow your mind. The command, the pitchability, the focus, the presence, all of it. It is a special 1-1 was probably never more deserving, and this guy's doing everything he can. And he's cut from a different cloth. I've seen him show up at ballparks. He's dressed, the suit and the tie.
Yeah.
The 4 days work between starts is just as important to him as that fifth day, similar to AJ Burnett. He's also got those eyes. For me, it's gunslinger eyes. It's eyes on the mound that this guy, there's no lose, there's no fear, there's no backing down. There's steely. He's self-confident. I love watching him pitch. So I'm just hoping this entire thing can come together where he can be a part of something special. He's doing everything he can. They show up when he pitches, that's for sure, don't they?
They do. It's a fun time, man. Haven't seen an atmosphere like that since you were managing. And, I agree with everything you're saying. The final way I want to wrap this up, and again, I'm going to knock the microphone over. Clint's book, of course, Hurdleisms. Make sure you pick it up. But a big part of it, Clint, you talk about the journey that you guys have and what it led, what led to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and how you were able to stay in the hunt and break through and all that stuff. I feel like this group of Pirates is maybe in the early parts of that, the 11, 12 into 13, looking to take that final step. For your team, I know you talked a little bit before about being defiant about what people on the outside were saying, but what is that next step? What does a team need to do when you get so close? You have the disappointing finishes. Is it just buckle down more, change things? Like how do you sort of see that process, and can those things happen?
Well, they can happen. I don't think anybody saw our 13th season coming the way it did. There were signs. I think we felt it a little bit, but it becomes a momentum builder as the season goes on. And it doesn't mean you've got to come out. They've come out of the blocks hot the last 2 years. That's not been a challenge. It's the sustainability over an entire season. That takes depth. That takes consistency. That takes winning games offensively. It takes winning games defensively. It takes winning games from the starters, from the bullpen. So it's that total team component when dependability becomes the key word in the clubhouse. I've shared this multiple times. I've had a couple disagreements. The greatest ability a player can bring to his team is his dependability. Same for a manager, same for a coach. When you look around that clubhouse and there's 25, 26 men in there, and guys can look around, they say, dependable. Who knows if he's going to show up? You get 3 or 4 of those guys in the clubhouse, it makes it hard. You basically do need 26 guys that are throwing down every day for what's best for the team and preparing for whatever their role might be that day. You need coaches in the same mind frame, and you need a manager in the same mind frame. And knowing, from my perspective, that manager, when things were going bad, I needed to take all the heat. Own it, all of it. That's what I signed up for. When things are going good, I needed to be a mirror and let everybody see through me and see the coaches and see the players, because they were the ones doing the work. I do think anything can happen, and it's a division, I believe, that is there to be had. It's not like I'm working with the Rockies now. We're going out west. We play in that NL West. Whoa. That's a challenging division. Yeah. It's a little different look in that division. than it is the Central. I'm not downplaying the Central. I'm just saying where teams are at. It's a blessing that you don't play, that we do play the even schedule now versus the one where you play your own team, teams in your own division 19 times. The Pirates, I'm just, like I said, I wish them well for the fan base, for everybody that works in that building, for all the vendors downtown, the hotels. You know what it could be. We know what it's been. Maybe it's time now. Let's just hope it happens again.
Clint, thank you for being a source of positivity on Twitter. Thank you for writing this book. It's excellent. Anybody who is interested, Clint Hurdle, Hurdleisms, Wit and Wisdom from a Lifetime in Baseball. It is excellent. And thank you for joining me on this program. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Jason, thank you so much for the opportunity. I wish you nothing but good things. All
right. Check back next week for another episode of Saturday Conversations. This has been the Post-Gazette North Shore Drive podcast and YouTube channel.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.